Hello, I'm your host, Jeff Allen Wolf, with a special edition of A World Gone Mad. Donald Trump found guilty on all 34 counts, felony charges. At first we thought they were going to be dismissed for the day, the jurors, and that's what I saw when I was watching the trial, or it wasn't live in the sense of no cameras allowed in the courtroom. But they did announce that in 15 minutes, they're going to dismiss the jurors. And I thought, okay, it's going to Friday, and we're going to have hopefully a verdict by then. If it goes past that into Monday, we got a hung jury. Then all of a sudden, the vibe changed. It was announced 4 words. We have a verdict. We have a verdict. And then it became more interesting. The jury asked the judge if they can have 30 minutes before they came in to announce that verdict. And the reason why is they needed to fill out the juror form. Now, exactly what is that? Well, Andrew Weissman, who was involved in the prosecution of the impeachment trials, stated that this is interesting. This is not needed if there was an acquittal. We knew it wasn't going to be a hung jury because they would say to the judge, we need more time. And that wouldn't happen until Friday. And then at the end of the day, the judge would call them back for Monday, and the foreperson would say, we just can't come to a verdict. So we were pretty confident when we heard the 4 words, we have a verdict, it was not a hung jury. So the juror form. Andrew Weissman stated that if it was an acquittal, they don't need to fill out that form. They could just come into the courtroom, announce their verdict, and say, Donald Trump is acquitted of all charges. So we knew at that moment there was some combination of guilty and not guilty. Andrew Weissman further elaborated that if you hear the first couple of charges, not guilty, he said to the listening audience, don't panic, have patience, because those first couple of charges, the felony charges, were minor charges. Those were the checks that Donald Trump didn't sign. They probably wouldn't convict on that. So relax, hear the whole verdict before you get upset one way or the other. Then the moment of truth happened, and the charges of each felony indictment count was read. First charge, guilty. Second charge, guilty. Third charge, guilty. Fourth charge, guilty. Fifth charge, guilty. Sixth charge, guilty. First 6 counts, Donald Trump found guilty. Then the rest of the counts and the verdict for each count was read, and they came rapidly. Guilty, 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 guilty. 19 charges, 20 charges, 24 counts, guilty. 34 counts guilty. Every single charge against Donald Trump, he was found guilty. Unanimous by the 12 jurors, guilty on all charges. 12 jurors that the prosecuting team and Donald Trump's defense team accepted to the jury pool. 12 people from different walks of life and different professions judged Donald Trump. 2 of those members were lawyers, if you remember. One of them, maybe 2, I'm not sure, were telling the juror, or rather the judge, that they get their social media from Truth Social. So we had a potential for one Donald Trump supporter to cause a hung jury. Yet 12 individuals from all walks, from everywhere, guilty. The judge thanked the jury and thanked them for their due diligence and patience and intense examination of the case and dismissed them. But of course, Donald had to come out and give his opinion on the 34 counts of guilty against him. I'm going to read you in its entirety Donald Trump's comments when he left the courtroom in front of the media pool and in front of the microphones. Donald Trump speaking in reaction to the verdict. This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt as a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people, and they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA, and the whole thing. We didn't do anything wrong. I'm a very innocent man. And it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to vote, to wound, or hurt an opponent, a political opponent, and I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end, and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists. And they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case. Never. And we still will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much. Donald, as usual, throws out some disjointed comments among his other rambling thoughts about any time he loses, it's the system's fault. It's the country, it's the judge, it's the reporter, it's the voter, it's the DA. You name it, it's the daughter of the judge. Donald Trump throws out the lowest form of comments he could come up with, and he creates panic in his supporters' minds, and a lot of people out there buy it. But I'm going to repeat, for the intelligent people who are listening to this podcast, a grand jury brought the indictment. Nothing to do with Biden, nothing to do with a rigged DA's office. 12 jurors from all walks of life, Democrat, Republican. Some would probably love Donald, some probably dislike Donald. All walks of life found you, Donald, guilty unanimously, 34 counts of election interference, hush money, rigging, documentation, paperwork, whatever you want to call it. The bottom line, sir, you are guilty. So the next steps would be Donald Trump's lawyers to say to the judge he wants them to set aside the motion, which will be denied. They have a right to do that. He will file an appeal. Now realize this is a state trial, not a federal trial. Cannot go to the Supreme Court. So the highest it can go to is the Federal Appeals Court in New York. If all the paperwork is filed on time by both sides of the attorneys, Donald's and the prosecuting team, then the appeals court will not render a decision until January or February of 2025. However, what I had found out, the sentencing still takes place, even if there's an appeal in place. So July 11th is when the sentencing is supposed to happen, and that will be rendered one way or the other. Then the appeals will be decided on next year. I personally don't know what the sentencing is going to be. It's quite possible there could be prison time, and the judge is allowed to take into account the gag order that Donald Trump violated 11 times in his sentencing. The DA will make a recommendation, Alan Bragg, and the judge will take into account all of that. But quite frankly, at this moment in time, I don't care what the sentencing is. You want to know why? Because this was a major moment. This was a key moment in time to show some accountability for Donald Trump at last in something as serious as this. It's an e-felony, but the highest form of e-felony crime. So besides monetary damages against Donald, this is a serious verdict. So some key observations. The sentencing will be July 11th. And a couple of days later, you know what shows up? The Republican convention to nominate their president who is going to run against President Biden. Will the Republicans use this moment in time, if he's sentenced to prison time, to say, you know what? We really don't want a guy who has prison time as a sentence to be the leader of our party? Or are they going to do like they did today, standing up like Mike Johnson and everyone else saying, this was a disgrace, this was a travesty? On top of that, Donald Trump is already sending out notifications to people to give him money, claiming he's a political prisoner, and his MAGA supporters need to rally to him. 10 million of them he asked for to donate to his cause, to help him because he's a political prisoner and he's the only one who could save our country from destruction. How despicable, Donald. And the worst part of it is, your MAGA supporters will buy this garbage. So what do we look for next? In the next 24 hours, a week, 2 weeks, a month? Well, is there going to be any ramifications or repercussions? Is there going to be any violence from the MAGA supporters, the lunatic fringe out there? Will they take their justice out on the judge or the jurors? Let's hope not, because that would be devastating. The other thing is the documents case. I personally think Judge Eileen Cannon needs to be removed from the documents trial, replaced with a real judge instead of this judge who's in bed with Donald. Now remember, this case that was just decided today is the lowest or weakest of all the cases against Donald. The document case has a serious potential for major prison time for Donald. So let's watch for that. Justice was served today, and at this moment in time we can breathe a little easier to know that this former president, and I still maintain the most dangerous man in the world, was put in his place, at least for today. Let's hope the next couple of months bring more accountability. For A World Gone Mad, with this special edition, I'm your host, Jeff Allen Wolf. Definitely stay hopeful after today's verdict.